My name is Kerem Öktem. Welcome to the fourth panel of the day, to this all-male panel for which I'm not responsible, but I hope we'll make good for it through academic excellence and brilliance. This fourth panel on intercommunal relations, Armenians, Assyrians, and Kurds. We have three speakers, and we'll start right away with David Gaunt, who is an emeritus professor of history at the University of Södertörn in Stockholm. Since 1997, I think he's been working on and publishing on mass violence and genocide towards minorities, Jewish, Roma, Gypsies, Assyrians, Armenians, and he's the editor of a book which many of you will know. It's very new, about the Seifo, the genocide of the Assyrian, Chaldean, and Syriac peoples, which he co-edited with Naures Atto and Soner Bartoma. And the book, the paper he will be presenting now has a slightly different title. It's The Ethnic Cleansing of Assyrians from Hakkari, 1915 to 1925. Professor Gaunt, please.
Is on now? Yes. Super. I have 15 minutes to make a presentation. Knowing the short time that we usually have in these panels, I have printed out 25 copies of my presentation. So if you raise your hand, you can probably get one. I'm sorry that there are not enough.
Why don't you give this time to us?
I will. So, I am. Goodness. I thought there would not be that much of a... Okay. My time. Okay. Friends, let's begin. The time is short anyway. There have been many questions about the identity of us who are scholars. And
we just started, so...
Okay. May I? Yes. My identity, I have no Assyrian identity whatsoever. I have from my English father inherited a sense of fair play, in the English version of it, at any rate. From my mother's Jewish family coming from the darkest corners of Ukraine, I know of persecution of minorities and what it does to you as a consequence. At a very young age, I left the United States for Sweden because of a war, and I have lived there ever since. This makes me having a very complex identity if I wanted to, but I try to be an historian without identity. This means that I follow the documents. I follow trails of paper through the archives, through the libraries, in order to find some sense in what happens in the world. I'm not sure that I always find out what happens, but I find a certain understanding. I will be talking about the deportations and the expulsions of Assyrians from the Sanjak of Hakkari in the period from 1914 up until when the last Assyrians are pushed out of the Hakkari region in 1925-26, along with the issue of the border between the Republic of Turkey and Iraq. So I think my identity makes it easy for me to see the complexity of the Assyrian case. In Ottoman times, no one was called an Assyrian in a document by the Ottoman officialdom. They were called Nasturi or Nasturiler because of their religion, which was an independent Orthodox religion with a sort of reference to a theologian named Nestorius who was declared a heretic very early on, and his followers moved to Iran, where they got a sort of a free place. There is also a breakaway group from the Nestorians who call themselves Chaldeans or are allied with the church in Rome. They are different from Armenians by speaking the Aramaic language. The Neo-Aramaean dialects are many. This is a Semitic language, very closely related to Hebrew and Arabic. There is a very unique alphabet, so you could recognize when the Syriac language is being used, in contrast to the Armenian. Territorially, they are limited. If you look at the handout, it's on the back a map showing the territory of the Nestorian Assyrians, and it stretches from in the west from Siirt and Botan to Urmia and Lake Urmia in the east, and in the south down to the Mosul province. So it's basically east of the Tigris River, west of the Lake Urmia. Now, what is specific for Assyrians in Hakkari is a formation. About a third of the population of the Assyrians belongs to tribes with the Ashiret status, so that they are independent mostly. They can carry weapons, and they are just as fierce and war-like and feudal as the neighboring Kurdish tribes. Sometimes you cannot see the difference except for their hats. Up until, as Suavi Aydin was mentioning, there was a coexistence and a balance of power for a while, up until the middle of the 19th century, after the Badr Khan invasions, also the creation of the Hamidiyya regiments. This balance of power disappeared, and negatively for the Nestorians. And they began to look for help from the outside. I won't mention the missionaries, but the Russians were very interested in this group because it was along a border. There were contacts many times. Many Russian diplomats, military were there. And unfortunately, the Ottoman authorities also knew about this. So, let me see. Okay, statistics, they are about 75,000 Assyrians at the beginning of the First World War. This is from Russian documentation, which is very accurate, and French documentation. They end up with that. About 25,000 are belonging to the Ashirets, and 50,000 to Riaya, who belong to them. It's in the paper. There comes a deportation order ordered by Talat Pasha. Talat is involved in this micro management of the deportations. The 26th of October 1914. This is about a week before real fighting begins between the Ottomans and the Russians. And there is also an arrest order for Assyrian leaders coming on the 28th of October. The reason for this is the suspected disloyalty of the Assyrians. They know about the Tsarist Russian contacts, and they are ordered to be deported to Konya and Ankara as suitable places. As Hilmar Kaiser pointed out many years ago, this order was never implemented. I thought at the beginning that, well, it's because the war broke out. But on the other hand, if you consider the 26th of October would mean the deportation of a group of people, large, being sent over the mountains in the middle of winter without any support. So it would seem to be an order for a death march in case it was actually implemented. What happened instead was a series of massacres beginning in November and December, which we already have mentioned in the first panel. Now, the Russians had a special extraordinary commission to interview refugees coming from Ottoman territory. It was also mentioned in the first panel. Some of the refugees being interviewed were Assyrians. I'll read just one of them. This is very important because this is a relative of the Marshimun. The Marshimun is a combined patriarch and civil leader of the Assyrians. This is the village of Artshi. It's rather close to Bashkala. The Turks attacked the village of Artshi in November 1914. These Turks were not regular Askari, but the Sultan's special volunteers, called the group Hamidiyya. The head of the group was Officer Hurshid Bey. Hurshid Bey is the leader of the Pinyanish Hamidiyya. As soon as they invaded Artshi village, they set the house of Yohanan Abdarov on fire and arrested my husband and sons. They were tortured to death. They were beaten from all sides in order to become Muslims, but they refused. Before my eyes, Hurshid Bey shot my sons with a pistol. As I saw what happened, I tried to protect my husband, but Hurshid Bey kicked me in the face, knocking out 2 teeth. Then he shot my husband with 6 bullets. The corpses of the dead were left lying on the road, and we were not allowed to bury the dead. On the following 4 hours, the dogs ate the corpses. Then Hurshid Bey ordered that the corpses should be thrown in the latrine, where even the cross of the village got thrown. Hurshid had the whole village burned and 12 people more killed. All the women, virgins, and children were taken captive and brought to the village of Atis. They had to choose between Islam or death, and 150 women and girls were forced to become the wives of Hurshid Bey's relatives. Of the prisoners, only I remained because Hurshid Bey knew I was the cousin of the patriarch Marshimun. She goes to the Marshimun and informs him of this. Now, we talked about dates in December, and it would seem that the Marshimun took contact with the Russian vice consul Vedensky on November the 10th, or if it's new style, November the 23rd, asking whether his tribes should attack the Kurds and the Turks in retaliation. He was told not to do this. However, this gives us a new idea, because it must have taken some days before the 10th of November, that immediately as war broke out, Christian villages, Armenian and Assyrians, were being attacked on the Van side of the border. I'm running out of time, Kerem. Oh, super. Now, massacres continue for a long time. Then, as you know, the Armenians in Van are besieged by Cevdet Bey and Turkish troops and gendarmerie. A Russian relief column is being sent to them, and they get into a battle on the Iranian side with Halil Bey, the general, who is marching up towards Baku, and they defeat him in Dilman on the 1st and 2nd of May. He retreats into towards Bashkala, and the Assyrians are designated by the Russians to stop Halil's troops. So in a way, we have an Assyrian help to the Armenians, which the Armenians in Van, of course, do not know anything about. They managed to stop Halil's troops. They retreat in bad order over the mountains towards Siert and Bitlis, where they commit extraordinarily brutal massacres. In retaliation for this, Talat sends a telegram to the Vali of Mosul, Haidar, saying that he should march up with fresh troops from Mosul and coordinate an attack from all sides with Kurdish volunteers to eliminate the Assyrian presence. They should not be allowed to return, is one of the points in his in this telegram. And they are pushed out. I won't go through the really details. Nicholas has published a book about this. No, under Eva Haddad's? Okay.
That was my grandfather.
Okay, grandfather has published a book about this. And so, at any rate, they are pushed out over the Iranian border in September 1914, where they gladly join the Russian army as volunteers, where they do a lot of damage to their Kurdish friends. Some of them, after the war, managed to get back to Hakkari. They hope to set up a new society, but fail in this. And finally, these people are pushed out in 1925-26 on the order of the Republic of Turkey in a large military campaign. Those who are dealing with the border issue comment on this. These were atrocious massacres being committed. That is the story. Now, the Assyrians themselves, the tribesmen in particular, never used a victimhood sort of narrative as to what had happened to them. They were fierce warriors, fought fierce battles, but didn't win. Okay, that's it. It was fair and square. So a narrative of genocide comes in very, very late to this, and not completely altogether. In this way, they are like the Armenians of Van. They did a good show, and they lost. That's it. I quit. I'm over. I'm sorry.